And just a note for everyone here, we are recording. The meeting will get started momentarily, but just letting everyone know ahead of time, we'll be recording this, and just so we can have notes, for ourselves and make sure that we're capturing everything.
Dan, if you could take notes as well, you can do it on Mural or you can do it elsewhere, but that would be great. Thanks.
Of course.
Nói rằng đó là khi chúng ta cười mà chúng ta nói cười thoải mái quá thì
Hello, everyone. Someone say something. I want to check if my sound is good.
Evening, Dennis. It's good to hear you. This is Dan.
Oh, my sound is terrible. I need to fix that.
Aaron, Rule, and Barikia and Amber, I'm going to make you co-hosts as well. Hope that's okay. Just help with the monitoring, muting background. Mayor Sadler, thanks for joining us. In a minute, I'd love to see if you could welcome everybody to the Zoom meeting, but we'll probably start in a few minutes if that's okay.
Yes, that'll be fine.
All right, someone say something.
We're all good.
Good. I can hear everyone now. Hey, Dan, this feels like Scabo's class.
Does it not? especially those last few months there.
Uh-huh. Wow.
Mike, and I guess everyone else on the call here, Dennis and I were classmates and colleagues in the MPA program over here in Greenville at ECU.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show, Dennis. And good segue. I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful Mayor Sadler and just to welcome everybody. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedule this afternoon to join us in this very important meeting and in discussing and in developing a plan for our 15th Street corridor. It is very important that we get this plan right this time. So please keep in mind as to whatever plan we do come up with, that DOT will support and most importantly fund, because they will be the funding source. So, but thank everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sadler. I'm actually turning over to see if Jonathan is on as well, your city manager. Jonathan? All right, with us just yet. As other people fumble in or connect back into us, we're going to keep it on schedule. We'll, we have until 6:30, but honestly, we probably won't use all that time. This is day one of a multi-day design workshop, and we're really excited to be back here. Unfortunately, we're virtual, but you know what? We're going to make the best of it, right? And we'll probably today, we just want to go through where we're at in the schedule, right? What we heard from the public via online surveys, online interactive mapping, as well as the project symposium, which was an open house that we conducted back in January. And we had about 90 people on that call. So that was fantastic. And also we had been getting a tremendous amount of feedback through the surveys and through the interactive mapping. So it's been terrific. We've also been hosting a series of focus group discussions. Focus group meaning we're really honing in on a particular topic related to 15th Street corridor, and kind of helps us kind of frame it out so we can get all the specifics. So bear with us. We might let you out a little bit early, but then again, as days progress, we'll have more and more information, and we'll show you more and more design concepts as we go along. So thanks for joining us this Tuesday evening. Let's jump right into it. First thing I want to do is kind of introduce the folks that are making this happen. First, we'll start with Jonathan and Aaron and Barikia, and that's really the staff level. And I think I'm going to, Betsy Kane, I'm going to put you in that category as well. Jonathan's your town manager here, and Aaron is the PR specialist working with Barikia. And of course, Betsy is on the council. So we want to make sure that all the practitioners, all the elected officials, everybody's well informed as we move along. And so those are kind of the leaders with the local community. My name is Mike Rutkowski. I'm a planner and engineer. I'll be your project manager. And on our team, we have several folks that are listening in, including Dan Hemme and Amber Lewis. And those are some of our planners and designers and landscape architects and other engineers that are helping to craft those design concepts. And we'll show and talk a little bit about that over the next hour. So with that, we wanted to talk about the schedule and where we are at, right? If you think about 4 quarters of a football, I know this is NCAA March Madness, but if you could think about this as a football game, the first quarter is all about the due diligence and the data collection. And that's interesting, right? Because that's where we understand about congestion and traffic and the way we are dealing with crashes and safety issues. But it's also lets us understand the demographics. Who uses this corridor, 15th Street? How do people interact with it, live, work, and play? The second corridor was all about the Project Symposium, which is a glorified rename for a public workshop. And that was virtual, as you remember. We asked you some tough questions. We're going to show a little bit of those answers to your questions in a little bit here. But that's really where our data analysis occurred. And understanding how people are using it and all the design issues that we have to contend with along this corridor. third quarter, or the third segment or phase of this process, that is what we're into right now. And it really culminates and centers around this 3-day design charrette, which is a fancy word for a multi-day workshop. And so we'll be with you Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Every evening at this time, 5 o'clock to 6:30, we'll host these pinup sessions, and we'll walk through all the ideas that were shared that day, good, bad, and ugly. Some of the ideas, we'll embrace it and move on and design them out. Other ideas, they may not pass the mustard, right? And so we'll put them to the ground, walk on them, and go to the next big idea. And that's important because ever since day one, we've always said, hey, there's going to be different problems that we need to identify. There's certainly different trade-offs, understanding who's priority along this corridor, and we'll never be able to appease everyone. And that's something I say every time we get on this conversation. We're not here to build 100% consensus. We're here to create informed consent. Hopefully, if you're a part of this process, you'll understand the decision process along the way, and you've been able to interact and share your opinion and share your thoughts. Hopefully, you'll walk away, maybe not with your top 10 priorities, but maybe 6 of those top 10 at the end of the day. And that is success. The last quarter of the football game, if you will, is the open house. We'll go back to our studio and redefine and revisit and redesign some of these concepts, and then come back to you and kind of celebrate the final edited version of design concepts, photo sims, and other ideas and recommendations. And that's really important. So we'll come back. This is a short time frame for this. Overall, it's about 5 months. And so we'll come back probably a month and a half from now, after we've had a chance to talk with Mayor Sadler and the council and the practitioners, and better understand where they want to make some edits along these design concepts. So that's where we're at. It's a short time frame, but the charrette-based planning process really helps us to make good decisions along the way.
Excuse me just a moment. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Councilwoman Virginia Fennery also. I think she's in with us today also. I'd like to welcome Councilwoman.
Yes,
Virginia
here
Fennery.
I am.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Very
And
much.
thank you again. Good to see your face again. It's Virginia. So yes, thanks for being part of it. And honestly, we really appreciate, the decision makers coming to the table. They need to hear the same thing, the same frustrations. Look, they drive cars, they ride bicycles, and they are pedestrians every day of their life too. So they interact with this corridor the same way you do. And it's good to understand where our needs are and some of those trade-offs are. And so thanks again for joining us. And it makes it more meaningful, to be honest with you. So as we look ahead, the corridor, I want to describe that, right? It's the same footprint, if you will, as NCDOT looked at it 4 years ago. Unfortunately, we know what happened there. Went behind closed doors, redesigned the road, came back, and it didn't really meet the desire, the needs, or address the key problems along the corridor. The corridor limits are from Brown Street over here. I hope you can see that map, all the way over to US 17 Business Carolina Avenue over here. It's about 1.6 miles, and it's the same cross section throughout. We all feel the pain. It's 4 lanes with no turn lane. There's no bicycle amenities, and there's very little pedestrian amenities too. So I'm going to stop right there. Oh, by the way, here you go. A terrible factoid that we understand as well. We pulled the crash accident data over the past 8 or 10 years. And this corridor is actually experiencing 1.4% or 1.4 times the state average crash rate of a similar 4-lane road. That's not a category that you want to be in, but we all understand the inherent dangers of this corridor. And that's pretty much the priority problem that we need to address is safety. Safety not only for the traveling public, the folks behind the steering wheel, but just as, or if not more important, for the folks on 2 feet and 2 wheels that are going along the corridor for live, work, and play. So I'm actually going to stop there and go over to a package to show you a little bit more about what these designers have been doing. And we'll open it up too, just to get some idea. There you go. And someone please verify, look like I'm looking at Virginia or Mayor Sadler, just verify that you can see this mural and all these wonderful imagery. There you go. Thank you.
I
Thank
can.
you. All right. So we're going to hone in on what we heard, and we'll start with this. We'll zoom in a little bit. I know this is kind of funny looking. It kind of reminds me of the old Prezi PowerPoints that we did, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. But the things we heard, let's start with that, because I really think that's important. And I think that's an element that was missing 4 years ago when this project was initiated. That's why we're here today. And so when we look at things that we heard, let's understand who hasn't been engaging with us. For a community your size, it is absolutely amazing to see the level of feedback we're getting. We have received over 200 or 420 responses from the surveys alone. That's tremendous. We have over 200 interactive mapping comments. In other words, people are going into the map saying this is a problem area and this is a potential solution. That's amazing. And then all along the project, we've interacted with folks through stakeholder interviews and one-on-one conversations to better understand how people are using this corridor and what's a priority. So a lot of this information, I won't go through all of this, but it helps us to inform where do we deal with issues. It could be walkability. It could be getting across the road. It could be flooding, which happens along this corridor. It could be lack of lighting, and we've heard everything almost. And so what are the things predominantly what we're hearing is the safety issue. I think everybody agrees to that. Even NCDOT, Department of Transportation, agrees that safety is the number one problem along the corridor. And so we've heard of flooding issues, safety hazards, even walking. There's a lot of gaps in the sidewalk and the like. So as you look a little bit closer into this, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, look, we asked folks specifically, hey, the last time they looked at widening this project, it took well over 60, 70 feet of additional right-of-way on here. And I think that was just too much for the community to absorb. But there's still a contingency out there that said, hey, maybe widening's not the bad idea, but keep in mind, anything you widen, you go outside of the right-of-way, you're gonna have to take private property. You'll have to take parking. You most likely may take a building. And I think that's one of the things we're trying to, kind of steer around and try to avoid. Doesn't mean we won't take something in terms of maybe a sliver, but hopefully it'll be a sliver of right of way. The other half of contingency says, let's repurpose some of that asphalt. Let's repurpose it and see if we can use it for different amenities, different treatments, maybe for bicycle and pedestrian. And that's really the number one thing that we heard. So there's really a divide about whether to widen it or whether to narrow it. And we'll keep it at that. So next, naturally, we got to ask those tough questions of why. What is the really critical issues that we're trying to solve? And this is really, really important. So please pay attention and we'll open up the conversation. The biggest concern, let's face it, no one's building 4-lane roads anymore. Even DOT won't build just a 4-lane road. It'll either be a 4-lane divided or a 5-lane road, but it won't be a 4-lane road. These don't happen often. You widen yourself into this issue here. And so the biggest issue that people have is the lack of a turn lane. It's that simple because they can't see around people. They get caught up or they're behind someone puts on their blinker and they have to side swipe and go to the outside. Everybody that lives in this community, everybody on this Zoom call today has probably avoided a left turning car on 15th Street. And so it's the 4 lanes that really the people have the problem with, and really the lack of left turns. That's just the one being the driver. Other issues really are safety and crashes. There's a lot of crashes, as we know. It's higher than the state average, and we need to deal with that. And then third to that, in terms of congestion, it's really the traffic that's related to that issue, the overall issue. So what does that mean? Let's take a deep dive and look at how it feels comfort-wise and safety-wise as for being a pedestrian and bicyclist. And let's understand this. It is true. It's a very dangerous road to be on 2 feet or 2 wheels. So 84% are dissatisfied with the pedestrian safety. And granted, there's no real sidewalks along here, nor are there good adequate crossing or crosswalks or even pedestrian lighting along the corridor. Dissatisfied as being a bicyclist, well, there are no bicycle facilities. And so very few people use that. Keep in mind, 19% of the people, remember this, 19% of the folks that rent have zero vehicle households that live adjacent to this corridor. We pulled the demographics on there, and that is astronomically high, in my opinion. That means they have to go to work and to make trips and go shopping using their feet or using a bicycle. So just imagine trying to go up and down that corridor or across that corridor on a bicycle. We also asked you needed improvements, and a lot of you get it. You know, the basic premise in life and living in the city when you're trying to think about mobility is how do you cross the road? And right now, that is the number one priority that folks had expressed an opinion about, was fix the intersections and make it safer for us to cross the road and include those pedestrians or pedestrian facilities and amenities. And then we asked the last question. These are just a few of the multitude of questions. A lot of them are actually on the web page, the website, project website that's being hosted. So we actually asked, hey, how important is it to avoid the right-of-way takings on 15th Street? And that was the biggest issue that really threw the wet blanket, if you will, on the previous design effort that DOT went through. Almost 70% of you said, hey, it's important, or at least very important, to stay away from major right-of-way takings. And that's also very important to understand. It doesn't mean we may not impact right-of-way. We just can't take the level of right-of-way that it would take for widening this road. So I'm going to stop there and remind you that we really want you to use the chat box, if you will. If you have a desire, raise your hand. We got folks monitoring, and maybe we can have you talk a little bit, or even if you don't feel comfortable with the chat box, but please go ahead and do that. And I'm going to also remind my team, if folks come in and chat in the chat box, want to share that opinion, feel free to interrupt and we'll go from there. So now that we've heard, did a lot of due diligence and really listening to a lot of stakeholders and interviews, what does it boil down to? So we need some kind of guideline or format or structure before we tackle any complicated road like this, like 13th or 15th Street. And so we have what we call guiding principles. We crafted those based off of the products of the surveys and the product of the project symposium and talking with these stakeholder interviews and those groups. And so number one, our first guiding principle is right-sizing 15th Street with maintainable infrastructure. We do not want to over-design. That was the critical failure or fatal factor in the first time that DOT designed this. So we want to right-size it. What does that mean? That means we repurpose some of that right-of-way to make it more bicycle and pedestrian friendly, but also make it more safe for the traveling public. Second principle or guiding principle, priority must be given to pedestrians and bicyclists. Right now, they are priority number 8. They must be to the top. Every single one of us every day walks. Some of us can't. And some of the folks that live along that corridor, there are quite a few wheelchairs and ADA or disabled folks that need assistance even getting across the road. We've got to be more complimentary to all users of this facility. The third guiding principle is safety for all users is a must. Safety is the number one issue along this corridor. We need to fix that. And it can only be fixed through redesign. And we'll get into that. Principle number 4, limit property and right-of-way takings, right? We really need to do that because we're not going to be taking any buildings. That proved a point. We're not going to be taking significant right-of-way and taking people's parking spaces. That's just not going to happen. That's not the reality that we live in. And then last but not least, number 5, 15th Street must support surrounding uses through attractive design and human scale, right? A lot of the project or a lot of the development along here is a little bit older, probably 70s, 80s, even older than that. We got some single family residential, but we also have some strip centers in here. Some of them are not doing very well, like the not Washington Grove. What is the one that I'm thinking of, Dan?
Plaza.
Washington Plaza. Thank you very much. You know, at one day or another, it was very vibrant, had a lot of parking, but right today, you know, it's seen some turnover and there's some vacancy in there, probably not the highest and best uses. But as we put public infrastructure or public investment into this corridor, we should expect private reinvestment to respond. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of great examples all over North Carolina. We'll just pick on this state that shows great return on our investment. And we should totally expect that if DOT, the state, and the city of Washington puts money into this corridor. So I'm going to stop there and ask Dan to share any chat box comments.
I was on mute. We have one comment from Dennis saying, is it possible to have a complete street design on this corridor without right-of-way costs? I think that's a good question. And I think that really gets at what our design is. So
Yeah, so Dennis, that's a good question. It is a possibility, but remember, this 1.6 miles long. Our motto, I think, is this: understanding what happened 4 years ago with DOT and it gone away because way too much impacts to right of way. Our premise here, and I think I'm speaking on collectively from a group, and Mayor Sadler, please speak in, or Virginia, that'd be great. But this is the reality. We're going to try to minimize. I won't say we'll totally avoid right-of-way takings. That's a fallacy. But we're going to absolutely try to minimize the right-of-way takings. And I think it's our approach moving forward that is going to make that a reality for us. I think if we can minimize takings to right-of-way based on the intersection treatments, maybe for a left turn lane here or a sidewalk, I think that's more palatable to the community. But if we start blowing out both sides and going out 50 feet on both sides, just like what happened 3 years ago, that's just not going to happen. Mayor Sadler?
Yes, I agree. I think we want to minimize of taking of any property. So I truly agree with that. But
Awesome.
that's mostly the issue or the question, the number one question that I have been asked throughout the community, or will any property be taken?
Yeah.
So I told them that we can that was not the goal, and that would be at a minimal if so, but that is not the goal to take any property or properties.
Perfect. And the next question, Virginia, you chimed in there. Can we protect the trees? Interesting enough, and that's a great question. So I want to share some insight that we got from one of the focus groups. And I'll go down here. We actually are doing a lot of listening just to show, and then I'm going to answer that question for you, Virginia. This is, folks, just to let you know, we actually came down here and invited several people from emergency services, fire, rescue, police this morning. And all of these comments were given to us through them. A lot of things they see, experience, are things that you see. Here's a good one. These are actual quotes. People don't like to stop. Traffic flow and congestion. A lot of people are speeding through, hurrying up and speeding through illegally when the lights turns red. And so there are some issues there. Lack of turn lane is a problem. So they're reiterating some of the same things that you're saying as well. So we're hearing at least some consistency along the way from emergency fire and rescue. We learned a lot from them. Over here is appearance and beautification, Virginia, to answer your question. What I would challenge, look at all the comments that we've had here in terms of beautification, street tree preservation. They also brought up using trees for stormwater filtration and beautification, but also slowing down vehicles, as vehicles speeding was one of the things that the emergency services brought up. The police, he does a lot of ticketing, people not only going through red lights, but speeding along the corridor. And so the street trees, my challenge back to the community, let's do an inventory of trees that we want to keep and trees that are dying, so that we as designers can include more trees in there. Our objective at this point is to bring in more street trees on the peripheral to provide, canopy effect, to provide some shade, Virginia. so that when people are walking, they get protected from the sun, it gets hot. And also provide that sense of enclosure beyond just beautification, but sense of enclosure to control speeding cars and the like. So any thoughts there, Virginia?
No, I like what I'm hearing. I'm hoping any old growth trees do not have to be removed. No, there's some really old trees along that road.
Yeah, and we're hoping that stays the same. We're consistent with that. That's our really hope, because let's face it, no one's running off the road and crashing into these trees. That's a fallacy too. So let's keep what we have and protect that interest. We also talk about gateways in here as well to let people know they need to slow down, because again, you have the hospital there, you have commercial, retail, you have single family, you're probably going to have multifamily along it. You got the food line, the shopping center. You've got a lot of things going along, and office. And then you have the tractor supply, so light industrial too. And so people are using this for different reasons, and it needs to be a little bit more predictable, especially for cars that are coming into the community, maybe driving through the community, that they need to slow down and expect pedestrians and bicycle activity. A lot of folks, I mentioned, I'll pick on just a few of these drainage issues. That's excellent. They actually gave us specific locations along the corridor. Need for a pedestrian walking path separate from the corridor. And I'll speak very direct to this. We actually talked, our last group today was a discussion with bike ped advocacy groups, right? And so they brought up interesting things like ADA compliance needed, right? To improve those intersections, get those folks able to cross. Those folks that are disabled, that have a hard time getting from A to B. Think how tough it is to get across in a wheelchair in some of those intersections like Market Street. Slowing speeds are really, really important. And honestly, it's the speed differential that kills. And it's the speed differential that really causes discomfort for people that's on a bike or walking. They also said something very interesting that I thought was a great takeaway. They mentioned all ages and abilities. And to me, it's that, not everything, but it's that 8 to 80. We want to be able to allow someone, a kid with a bike helmet on there, maybe not ride a bike on the street, but along a pathway if it's separate. Even someone that's retired that wants to go walking. A lot of folks saying they're going to the cemetery to actually walk around it. Some people are driving to the cemetery just to walk around it because they don't feel safe crossing 15th Street. And that's important. Yeah, so a lot of key takeaways on the bike advocacy group as well. Dan, anything shared in the chat box?
Nothing yet.
All right, here it comes, folks. We're gonna get down to the nuts and bolts at this point.
You know what, Mike? 1 second. There's a comment. It says, does a 51-49 split for widening the road not warrant a larger sample size?
Oh, well, sample size has difference than the percent split. So I would have to say, granted, this is not a scientific survey. You want that? We'll have to get a whole new company to come here and do that. But out of 408 responses and 200 comments on the interactive mapping, as well as the folks that went through the instant polling on the surveys from the Project Symposium, I think that's a pretty good indication that, you know, you're balancing that, right? And again, I'm not putting too much emphasis on, you know, 50-50 split on whether to widen or whether not to take any additional right of way. I'm just pointing that out, that is what we're seeing in the results. So that's a good point. Did you want to say something? There you go. Go ahead, Pat.
I would just say, you know, I think you look at our survey results in sort of in the broader context of the whole survey, right? 51-49 doesn't really indicate that there's consensus one way or another, but we would look at all of the questions as a whole to say, what are people concerned about? If we're saying, well, I don't know if we want to widen it or we don't want to widen it, what are the other things that are people clearly saying, yeah, this is a problem we need to solve? And so, you know, you look at, you know, the problem of 4 lanes with no center turn lane. You know, you look at the fact that turning crashes are the most common crash on that corridor, and that people are very concerned about taking property on either side of the corridor. And we say, well, even if there may not be some consensus there, we need to be very concerned and minimize that right-of-way impact.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Dan. And the key is this: we didn't want to stop there. That's the whole point of showing that results. So we drilled down to specifically what, when you think about safety, what is it? When you think about why you don't want to take new right of way, what is that? When you think about who's priority, who is priority, and what is the most difficult problems? That's why we went through all the other, I guess, the results of the survey questions to get to that end, to drill down, because I knew that question alone just is not going to solve the issue. So I thought that was pretty insightful. So Roland, will the plan deal with infrastructure under 15? Yeah, so we heard Roland brings up a good point. Thanks, Roland Wyman. There's a stormwater, the sewer line that runs below the surface. And Jonathan, you can chime in on this. And if you want to add some insight, we know it's dilapidated. We know it needs to be replaced. It doesn't need to be in the middle of the road anymore. And so part of this, we'll look at the cost. We're hopefully to work with the city to come up with what DOT estimated on that as well, and hopefully relocate that to the outside. And we're going to show you how we do that in a second. But Jonathan, anything to add? And Jonathan Russell, this is your city manager. So go ahead, Jonathan.
The sewer line runs fairly under the middle of the existing road. So that would probably be the largest expense. I think all of the utilities along the corridor would need to be addressed in some respect: water, sewer, stormwater, electric. All of those, maybe some rerouting, looking at some updating. And I think that cost would hopefully be built into the DOT estimates to move that project forward. But the sewer line would be probably the largest obstacle for relocation. But water and sewer lines, depending on where you are along the corridor, would probably need to be relocated also, as well as some adjustments to the existing electric utility.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. That's great. So I think that addresses that. Virginia also brought up, it would be important to know if the people in favor of widening own any of the property that would be taken. Yes, it's probably good. I don't know if we have that information, but yeah, it would be intriguing to find that out. But at the same token, I think we can come up with a amenable solution, and we're going to show that in a second about how to deal with it. Oh, and there's my friend Ned Holbert chiming in. Ned says, from extensive talks with almost all the businesses, people, commercial property owners on 15, almost no one wants 4 lanes. Almost all want 3-lane design Stantec is proposing here. Ned, you gave it away. You got to stop doing that. I'm just kidding, but yeah, let's jump into that. And let's talk about that cross section, because I mean, rightfully so. And here it is. There is no silver bullet that's going to take care of all of the problems along 15. But what we want to do is level the playing field, if you will. Right now, it is so car dominated and it's not working. If it has 1.4 times the state average crash rate, it is not working for anyone. So, but now we've got to give back, because let's face it, a gentleman that was on this call earlier today, I think his name was Clay, and said he actually saw pictures of this corridor when it was a dirt road. Yep. When tractors and horse carriages went along this road as it was dirt. It was then resurfaced. And from there, it was widened. All they did was add another lane. So you can just imagine 100 years ago, the function, the design of this corridor, 15th Street, was completely different than how it acts and works today. So too, we need to design. So when you look at the corridor, from curb to curb, it's 4 lanes, no center turn lane. And that, obviously is the biggest issue that we see here. So when someone stops in this corner, stops and takes a left-hand turn into a driveway, into the shopping center, into a side street, the car behind them has to react quickly. And everybody on this phone call that lives and works in Washington has done just this. They look over the right shoulder and they weave quickly over into the right lane. Pat Griffin, if you've ever done that, put up your thumb. You've never driven with, he's lying right there. So here we go. So what's happening here is this 4 lane is actually acting like a 3 lane, because the middle 2 lanes are acting like left turn bays, if you will. So it is 4 lanes, 11 feet wide from curb to curb with curb and gutter. And then you got some planting strips on the outside. It's 60 feet wide, owned and operated right of way. And that's important to understand. What we propose after talking with everybody and leveling the playing field is we would like to repurpose and look at the same use, not requiring additional right of way, but looking at repurposing this, bring in that outside lane, just one, we lose one lane. We reduce this to 2-lane divided with pocket medians, but predominantly a 3-lane section to allow those left turns to get off of the through lanes. And then we can repurpose this outside. We only bring in one, the north side curb and gutter inward and get rid of that outside lane to put in a side path or a 10-foot side path. What is a side path? That is an area dedicated for anybody that's on 2 feet or 2 wheels or handicap or a scooter or whatever you want on there. And really it caters to what the bike advocacy folks mentioned earlier, and that is that 8 to 80. It could be a child with a helmet that wants to get on his tricycle. It could be someone just going for a leisure bike ride or a jogger or anything. And so this is really an opportunity to get people to interact in a safe, protected area dedicated for bicycle and pedestrian and scooters and the like. On the opposite side, we would advocate for a sidewalk over there, a 5-foot with a little planting strip, and hopefully we can put in some street lighting and street trees, some of which may go into the center lane there. That's going to be about 12 feet or 11 feet wide. There's plenty. It may not be this large canopy tree, but some kind of verticality to slow down cars and beautify this corridor. And then on the outside, depending on where you put the verge area, which is that planting strip, you can either put the lights on the outside or in within that planting strip and put the street trees on the outside, all of which we're hoping to contain within the 60-foot right-of-way. So how do we apply that to our corridor? And what I'm showing you here is what I call a preferred access plan. It's extremely important to understand the framework of how does this all fit together. And just to reorient yourself, over here is Brown Street, okay? This is Brown Street over here. 1.6 miles to the west is Carolina Avenue or US 17 Business. Let's show you what we're looking at and then we'll straighten it out. First, I'm gonna stop for Dan and see if there's anything in the chat box.
Nothing new at the moment.
All right, perfect. So what we have here, I want to show you what you're going to see, and then we're going to show you what it could look like before and after renderings. So we have these high quality intersections. What do we mean by that? Now remember, the number one issue was getting across the street and all of the poles that we had as a bicycle, pedestrian, and the like, even cars pulling out. So high quality intersections, we want to put in dedicated left turn bays. Check. We also want to include high visibility crosswalk, pedestrian countdowns, street trees, ADA compliance, which are those curb ramps, and street level lighting. That was another issue that people don't think about. And so that's really, really important. All right. The next one is, we'll talk about this, but we actually encircled 5-minute walk shed radius around all these high quality intersections or places that we are making improvements to get people across the street. And we did a 5-minute walk shed. What's that distance? If you think about it, a quarter mile is a 5-minute walk distance. So we just did circles around these intersections. We have a potential for redesigning the intersection, 2 key intersections on the very end. That's Carolina Avenue and Brown Street. We want to treat them a little bit differently as folks come into and out of this corridor. We want folks to slow down, so we might design a little bit differently. Next, we have mid-block crossings. These areas here denoted by yellow. We're introducing 2 mid-block crossings. If we reduce this down to 3 lanes, 2-lane divided, we want to provide better opportunities for people to cross. And there are 2 locations along this corridor that we're suggesting a mid-block pedestrian crossing with a rapid flashing beacon or a hawk signal. And all that is just an actuated signal that a pedestrian or a bicycle can kick or punch that actuates and tells people they got to stop to let them cross. Next, we are showing segments of planted median. These are just pockets of median. And again, to provide that sense of enclosure, also to provide pedestrian refuge to people to get across the road. And then last but not least, we're proposing that multi-use side path, 10 feet along the entire corridor. So when we look at it holistically, this is what it looks like. And now you can see at the end, we got the redesigning intersections. What that looks like, we'll probably determine that tomorrow based on your feedback. We have the red are the existing signalized locations. And then we have these two proposed mid-block. And why that's important is this. We have certain locations. We have a market over here, and then we have the Tractor Supply intersection here. But that's a huge gap to ask someone to walk in order to just simply cross the road. We need something in between to allow that to happen. And this is Van Norland, is that right? And so that location is where we're proposing a mid-block crossing. The other location is between Market Street and Brown Street. We just picked a distance between the 2 points and putting another mid-block in there. Now, when you look at the whole corridor consistently and holistically, now we have these walk shed areas that are overlapping. Why is that important? Because any individual that's walking can get to a high visibility crosswalk within 60 seconds. And that is absolutely paramount for a safe corridor. I'll repeat that. That's very important. Anybody that has to cross this corridor, whether they're walking or whether they're on a bike, should be able to get to a high quality crossing within 60 to 80 seconds. And that is amazing because right now you can't do that. All right, I'm going to stop there, and then we're going to show some photo sims of what this could actually look like. Again, this is day one. As we move along, you're going to see more and more designs that we can share with you. So I apologize. Dan, anything on the chat box?
Nothing in the chat box, but I'd be curious to hear if there's any comments from this preferred access plan, or if people are just looking forward to seeing the renderings here and getting into the concept design itself.
Yeah, good point. Virginia, and I'll pick on you since you've been pretty active too. Go ahead and unmute yourself and share your thoughts.
No, I like what I see. I really like what I see, and I can't wait to see the renderings.
That was unfair, unfair.
I see a hand
Betsy,
raised
you
from
wanna-
Harry.
There you go. Betsy, you want to chime in? Or Ned, that's the first time you're seeing that? Or Galaxy A20? I see it, but I don't know what your name is. Go ahead, anybody.
I like it. My question, Mike, one question is on the north side of the street between, I think, Van Norden and Brown, there are a lot of residences. And I'm curious, is the 10-foot pathway going to be on that side? Because if it is, it's going to really cut off a lot of yard and driveway.
Okay, keep in mind, that's a good comment, but this is, I know it's hard to visualize. We're bringing in the north side curb and gutter in. So the area that we're putting in the multi-use path, right, is all within what's in there today.
So you're saying all that would be, instead of driveway taking and property taking, it would be pathway or concrete in your front yard?
What I'm saying is whatever is out there today in terms of right of way, that's what we're repurposing. Yeah. So we're taking in the curb inward, in towards the road. We're not encroaching on anybody's property. So everything that you saw in that cross section, let me show that, because a couple of people asked the same thing, and I want to make sure we're not confusing people. But there you go. This is a good way of showing it right here. This is the before. Right now, the state owns and operates 60 feet of right of way. We're actually taking this curb and gutter inward, not outward, inward. So we're just, we're repurposing that 60 feet. Isn't that wonderful? So
Yes.
no one's losing any driveways. No one's losing any yards.
I guess my only question regarding that is, it would be interesting to look at this final 3-lane design superimposed on the current curb as it is for those particular set of residences. And maybe you can do that at some other point.
Right, no. And guess what, Ned? You fed right into it. We're actually to design that over the next 3 days. Our engineers are working on that as we speak. I don't have a rendering of that yet, only because this is day one. Wait for day 2 and day 3, but we'll absolutely show that. Because honestly, as an engineer, I want to show the physical footprint of these designs. So we're doing this in what we call CAD and MicroStation, that is computer aided software. So we can actually show the physical footprint of those impacts or projected impacts and what that'll be. At the intersections, you might see some impacts to even some private property. That's to be expected. But along the corridor itself, we should be able to minimize the impacts and avoid a lot of those impacts on private property. So more to come on that, and I apologize if I know we're eager to see that. So I'm going to jump right into. Let me see if there's any more comments there.
You got one more, Mike, an important one from Dennis, but you've also got Mary, who's been raising her hand.
Mary, I can't see everybody, but good to see your face, Mary Day. Go ahead, Mary Day.
I was just wondering if at some appropriate point you could show us a picture of or describe these main intersections, say the one at Market Street and 15th Street, and tell us what they might look like whenever that feels appropriate.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll do that in a second. Next question, Dan.
Yeah, so there's a question asked from Dennis, and I think this is following up from his question earlier on complete streets. He said, would a complete street design adversely impact congestion? Because that could impact how it's scored in the spot process and potentially make it more challenging to get funding. So I think this is ultimately a question about funding, but also about congestion.
Yeah, so here it is, Dennis. We actually reviewed the spot analysis for other people. The spot, basically, let me inform what people, the spot prioritization is the way that NCDOT, the Department of Transportation, prioritizes their different projects. And a lot of it has to come from congestion or safety, relieving trash or addressing a high crash location or incident. It also can come from things like flooding and things that could cause accidents. That's unfortunately, that's what they really hone in on. You get very little value for the multimodal, although there's part of it, that's good, thumbs up for multimodal complete streets applications. But for the most part, the DOT, Department of Transportation, understand the data that they collect predominantly relates to congestion, traffic, and crashes. So we got to play by their rules. The good news is that 81 to 85 points that were received for this corridor had to do with safety. The congestion numbers were down to like 40. What that means for you is even DOT makes this a safety problem. And so we will still be able to address the safety problem along this corridor by incorporating a left turn, by incorporating median pockets, and addressing left turns at the intersection. So we're addressing that safety issue, especially when it comes to safety relative to bicycle and pedestrian. And keep in mind, there have been 3 fatalities for people that were not behind a wheel, but people that were walking or riding a bike along this corridor. And that's extremely important to the calculations that Department of Transportation uses. All right, next conversation over here. I like what I see so far. Thanks, Roland. I like what I see so far. Pat Griffin, thank you. Everybody's sounding Grace, thank you for that compliment. Almost okay. I'm going down. This is promising. Please continue rolling. You're awesome. The road will be used, not people's property. The road will be used, not people. Christine, if you can chime in, I'm not quite sure what that means, but oh, I see what you're saying. The road will be used and not the people's property. You're absolutely correct. And hopefully we're going to stay away from people's property for the most part. Good comment. Dennis, would a complete street? Okay, we answered that one. Betsy, and all the way, Dennis, just for FYI, we've already talked to RPO, the Regional Planning Association, to see it, and some of them might be on the phone right now, but see if they can recalculate based on our new cross sections of some of the things that we found. And they have agreed that they'll look at that after we submit some of the design features to them later on down the road. So we're really excited about that. Betsy Kane, which is one of your commissioners or council representatives, be sure to and publicize the next 2 pinup sessions that will be on Wednesday and Thursday, also at 5 p.m. You guys are killing me. This is great. Sheila, very informative. Thank you, Ms. Sheila. Betsy Kane, will drivers still be able to turn left and right into shopping centers and driveways of homes? The word is absolutely correct. And then again, they may be looking at a 2-lane divided or a 3-lane. Predominantly it's a 3-lane corridor that we're looking at. And that left turn lane will be dedicated protection for them to take a left turn. And of course, right turns will be allowed. Candace Moore, this plan reduces traffic capacity by 50% in one of the busiest areas in town. Can you speak to how the congestion would stunt growth and hinder access for businesses? Yes, we own property on 50th Street. Honestly, and Candace, I'll have to push back a little bit. No, it will not reduce traffic by 50% because the reality is that left turn, you have 4 lanes. It's almost reduced to 3 lanes today because when people stop and take that left turn lane, now the through lane is reduced to a left turn lane. And so this doesn't carry the amount of traffic that a 4-lane divided will or a 5-lane road can carry. It carries much less. But the carrying capacity, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this. We are reducing the capacity on here, but we're not eliminating it. And comparatively speaking, we need to give back to other modes of transportation because right now it's all predominantly dictated by the traffic. And Jonathan, I want you to chime in here too, because we talked about this extensively. There are a number of roads that people can use, including the main line, the main drag of 5th Street and 264 that allow people to get from A to B. Right now, everybody's trying to use this corridor. Granted, there's a lot of traffic. Traffic ranges from 13,000 to 20,000 vehicles along this corridor. Road diets within North Carolina alone, I've worked on one that was in Hillsborough Street in Raleigh that had even more traffic than that, and it's reduced down to 2 lanes. But it can be done, but it just has to be done in a safe, convenient way. And we got to respect ingress, egress, as well as truck delivery to all the businesses. Our promise to you is that we're not trying to break that access as we go along. Jonathan, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I think we're taking that into account, and that'll be one of the components we'll have to discuss with DOT. Their priorities are, traffic movement and things of that nature, as well as addressing the safety. So I think, that will be a variable that will be discussed in great detail on what the traffic volume numbers will be at the different alternatives we suggest.
Yeah, and that's a good point, John. It is all about the trade-off and something needs to give back. And I think that's what we're hearing from the constituents, elected officials, and the community is we've got to do something more for bicycle pedestrian, but we can't take additional right-of-way. And so it's like, where do you balance that competing interest? And again, it goes back to creating informed consent rather than consensus. So we will definitely balance that as we move along. And here's our premise. A lot of folks think that, and we heard it from the emergency service, fire and rescue. We heard it from all of the folks on our stakeholder interviews is that, someone made a great statement today. A couple of folks said, I'd rather be moving than stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. I just rather be moving. And I think and so the speed is something that we need to control a lot better because speed differential, and according to Chief Drakeford, speeding is a prevalent problem in here. And he brought it up several times. People are speeding through red lights to get through these red lights. So even driver behavior is not working out very well today as we speak. All right, let me see. Betsy chiming in. The things about 4-lane road is that there is no functional through lane because all of the lanes are functioning as right and left turn lanes. So it's always stop and go no matter which lane you are in. You are correct. That's a good insight on there. Ned, you wrote a lot here, so I may ask you to speak up here, but I'm going to read it anyway. Ned Holbert writes, with a 3-lane road, how much travel time will be added to the car driving from Brown 264 to Carolina Avenue versus current travel time for such car? One might hope that slowing traffic on 15 will encourage those who are driving through 50 to get to Greenville or to eastern part of the county and not stopping but in a hurry to get through, i.e. encourage them to take 5th Street 264 if they are not patient and willing to go at a slower pace. You are absolutely right. One of the litmus tests that you can take today is to get on 64 and pick a destination through your community. See what route that GPS takes it, right? You think about that. And this is a great point. Even the way GPS, and let's face it, everybody uses GPS today to drive. And so even the way they're telling even folks that are outside of your livable community, how they're getting through your community, will dictate how fast the speeds are along that corridor. And again, I think Ned brings up a good point. Your travel time is going to be dictated by the way the road is designed, right? And how fast or slow you can get through it. Again, I'd rather be moving than stop and go, stop and go. So if we can post this, say, for instance, at 35 miles an hour, right? And we post it and we do a progression controlled signal system. So all the signals are designed for 35 miles an hour. If someone decides to go in through here and go 50 miles an hour, they're going to hit stop sign and stoplight after stoplight because they're exceeding the speed. But if someone goes 35 miles an hour, 80% of the time they're going to hit a green ball so that they can move. So if you think about a progression controlled signal system, which is exactly what we're trying to advocate here on the operational side, that would be a good thing to do. And I think if you can understand the travel time and understand that we're trying to slow folks down, but at the same time, make it safer for everyone, that I'd rather be moving than stopping. I think that's a way that we can design this and make sure all the signals coordinate better and make it a more safe haven for all. All right, Meg Howdy. Let me see. Meg Howdy, public safety, whether in a car, on a bike, or by walking, should always be the #1 priority. Absolutely. When I talk to folks in their downtown, we do a lot of downtown master planning, downtown infrastructure. I said, what is their #1 priority in your downtown? And you ask, like, even elected officials, I'm going to pick on them. There's someone on the phone right now, but when you ask them what is priority in any downtown, #1 should always be pedestrian. Always. If you don't have pedestrian first in your downtown, you don't have a downtown. So think about that. How you treat and design this street will dictate who uses it. And right now, very few people on a bike use it. Very few people on a pedestrians use it unless you're absolutely dependent on those two modes. Emily, she writes in, is the goal of this project to get traffic through Washington or to provide a desirable community for people who live in Washington? And I would say, great observation. I would say live, work, and play. If you have someone coming into your community, even going through it or thinking about, where we're going to stop for a lunch, don't you want them to slow down and look around to better understand, hey, where am I going to meet up with a friend for coffee? Or where am I going to get some gas? Or is there a grocery store for me to shop at so I can, pick up the essentials before I get into my vacation home? So that's really important, Emily. That brings up a good point. And I would advocate, you want people to slow down, take in your community. Look, there's going to be some major reinvestment along this corridor, not just along the infrastructure, what happens between the right-of-way lines, but what happens beyond that. We've got to think holistically about that. That was Barney writing on Emily's tablet. Thanks, Barney. Good insight. Let's have people respect your community. It's historic. It's beautiful. You got a beautiful downtown. Let's celebrate that. All right. Those are enough of the chat. I think I ran out of those. Time to move on. And again, this is day one. So thanks so much for bearing with us here. What I do want to show here is kind of perspective of what this corridor would look like. Let me chime this down here. Move us down. Perfect. So this is kind of what, 15th at Minuteman Lane. This is the shopping center that I was referring to over here, the Beauty Supply. And I think there's a Mexican restaurant here. There's actually a Mexican restaurant back here. It's turned over so many times. It's seen its day. It's probably not the highest and best use. We just want to show what this corridor would look like in this perspective with our road improvements, as well as what could happen through reinvestment along the corridor. So when you zoom in here, we took some, artistical liberty here, but now we have the two-lane divide. This happens to be a segment there's no driveways in, but we also have the multi-use path over here, the side path where people can, walk, jog, ride a bike or whatever. But even beyond that, we have the pedestrian level lighting. Granted, our streetscape and our planting may not be this glorious, but you get the feeling that it's going to be separated facility and actually allow that pedestrian level lighting with some nice banners to welcome folks to the city of Washington. And then beyond that, remember what this looks like over here. You've got a sea of parking of nothingness. No one's doing anything with this hardscape. no one's really interacting in any way, form, or fashion at this location. In fact, this is turnover after of business after business that just can't make it here. What would it look like if you were really to make it a vibrant space with outside seating, which is this place is crying for, and even, you know, repurpose, but even keep it a taco or Mexican restaurant, but allowing, you know, great things like bike parking and kiosk and shade trees so people feel shaded. But what a wonderful space for people to congregate, people to have a lunch and really enjoy that space in a different way. You know, beyond that, we have some design notes that we can share. And it's really just adaptive reuse of the excessive parking, outdoor dining. That's kind of the reoccurring theme that we're seeing here. We're not saying tear down your buildings or anything, just repurposing some of the stuff that's out there. Maybe long-term, you know, as the property values increase, we, you know, in some of these properties that want to turn over or want to do something different, you've got a lot of green space too. We can most likely see that that's going to probably occur and happen. So use native grasses and street trees that integrate well. I think we heard that from the beautification and historic district folks. Maybe even use some of the design palette that along 5th Street and Main Street and kind of the downtown district so that we're not reinventing the wheel. Street trees and median and ornamental trees, you know, providing the pedestrian or the street tree canopies so that we have some shade along the corridor too. And these are more precedent imagery of some of the things that we just kind of populated in there, not to over design it, just to give you better ideas of some of those design palettes. Whether or not we go with this street level, pedestrian level lighting, we're indifferent. That's not the point. I think the point is we need pedestrian level lighting. Think about this. People use this corridor for 7 hours out of the day, maybe 8. Wouldn't you like to have this more of an 18-hour corridor where it's more active and people feel safe doing it even into the evening? All right, I'm going to look up here into the chat box. I do not drive. Currently, I have to get a ride to get from my home to where I work on 15th. This looks terrific as I will be able to walk or ride a bike when this is finished. Christina, thanks so much for chiming in there, because oftentimes the folks that don't have access to a car don't really activate or participate in these online virtual, even these meetings like this. So thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. Emily, hey, I would stop there on my way through Washington. Exactly. And you know what? Guess what? They're serving the same tacos they served today, right? Emily, there you go. And so it's just cleaning up what's there today and making sure it's meaningful for the people that want to use it and make it more attractive. Here's another one. This is before. Let me zoom out a little bit. Yeah, Van Norden. Remember I talked about the I mean, you can see all the way down there. How do people cross this road? They don't. And so look all the way down there. That must be 1,200 linear feet between the next crosswalk, if there is one, down there. And I think that might be Market, depending on where. I think we're looking west here. So you got the 4 lanes here. And what does that look like at Van Norden? This is kind of what it looked like. This is the first phase. You can tell our designer's not finished with this, but you have the pedestrian here. This would have to be a dedicated left turn lane. I think Betsy brought that up. This would be a dedicated left turn lane. You have to have some stop bars. This is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. It meets NACTO standards. These street trees probably wouldn't overhang or anything like that. But again, you see the canopy effect, but it would actually be a through travel lane on both sides. And then the walkway over here, we'll probably have to redesign this a little bit to make sure you get the adequate spacing that you need. But you can get a sense of what we're trying to accomplish here and create a more workable space. This is kind of a pedestrian crosswalk here, pedestrian refuge. As we do the crosswalks, you see more of those, more example work, and really using different textures at crossings along this location, just to show you different features that could be embedded in here, like pedestrian countdowns, and then tied in nicely with some mast arm signals. This is an example of a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. And again, these are actuated. If you're a bicyclist or if you're a pedestrian, you can kick it if you're on a bike, or you can push the knob and it'll activate for you. And these are some other perspectives. So tomorrow you'll see some of these other interesting perspectives come to life as we show more design features and as we look into it a little bit more. So I'm going to stop there, zoom out a little bit. I know this can get kind of uneasy, but let's go back to the chat box. And you were doing great on time, by the way. We're a little after 6 o'clock. So I know we're not a whole lot to show you, but that kind of concludes what we're showing tonight in terms of design. All right. Yes, we got a yes on that. All right. Perfect, Emily. I'll buy you your first taco and your first beer there. Hopefully when that redesign's there. All right. So I'm going to stop there before I get in too much trouble. Any other comments, Mary Day? It looks like you're unmuted.
Yeah, I was just asking the question again about North Market Street intersection. Are you ready to talk about that yet or not?
Mike, now you're muted.
Yeah, we don't have any renderings or anything, but what would you like to talk about? Go ahead.
I just wanted to know what you have in mind. Is it similar to what's there now or different?
All right, let's zoom in there a little bit here. There you go, right there. Now, we haven't designed this, so I'm not quite sure. So the difference will be this: we're looking at taking the 4 lanes and going down to 3 lanes in both directions. So that's one significant change. But good news is, whoop, let's get back up there. You will have a dedicated left turn lane now, where you don't really have one right now. And that was one of the issues that we heard again and again at these signalized and unsignalized side street locations. Car would be parked there, and unfortunately, if you're in that through lane, you got to weave around them to go around them if they get their left turn lane. So we will have dedicated left turn lanes on all quadrants now. How's that? This area up here will probably be this will be the side path right where this lane is right here. That'll be the 10-foot multi-use path with a verge and strip and planting strip. We're going to see obviously the street level lighting and some street trees in there. Here's one thing about the street trees, and I want to make perfectly clear. I don't want to overpromise here. The one thing we want to do is protect the trees that are there today, especially the healthy ones. Number one. Number 2, we might be looking at what they did on 5th Street for the street trees, additional street trees that go on the back side of the sidewalks and on the back side of the multi-use paths. What I mean by that, for those folks that are uninformed, in the 5th Street streetscape improvements, they actually did a volunteer street program. And Jonathan, you can chime in, or Betsy can chime in what the logistics on that. But the reality is this: we might be asking private property, hey, if we pay for the tree and maintain the tree, can we plant it on your property if that's okay? If they say no, then we walk away. But if they say yes, because they want a beautiful feature, that would be fantastic. So it might be very similar to what happened in your previous streetscape projects that you guys are finishing up. So good question, Mary Day. Outside of that, I think you're going to see a lot of high visibility crosswalks. I would also advocate that we look at this corridor and advocate for better cleaning this up. This looks cluster with the signalization here. I would advocate mast arm signals. This is your main corridor for commercial and retail commerce and the hospital, access to the hospital and medical. I would love to see the streetscape include mast arm signals. What do I mean by that? Last but not least, I talk about these types of features here. These are mast arm signals. They clean up, they get rid of the wires, and they clean up this, what should be a beautiful corridor welcoming people. So Mary Day, that's the other design feature that we would advocate for. And really nice, high quality, ADA compliance. You can see all the features that you see here, we would advocate at that intersection. That's your biggest major intersection outside of Brown Street and outside of Carolina Avenue. Good point. Chat box, Dan? You're on mute.
Dang it, I got caught just like all of us. We got a comment from Meg Howdy saying, updates such as these show a growing community. Thank you to the staff and team for their hard work.
Wow, and I didn't even pay her to say that, so that's good. Thank you. That's awesome. All kidding aside, yeah, more to come too, because we really want to really drill down some more detail. One of the things, and I forgot to mention this, flooding. And I'm gonna stretch this thing out. Anybody that has seen flooding or water issues along this corridor, please raise their hand. I wanna see it. There you go, there you go. Yep, don't be shy. A lot of folks are not showing their faces, but yeah. I think there might be some opportunity. We'll talk to our design team about integrating stormwater BMPs. What is that? Best management practices for relieving and filtrating some of the flooding problems that we're seeing along the corridor. And I really think that's important to do that. We've heard that, and it's just one of those things we just found out about today from some of the stakeholder groups. All right, that was Meg Howdy with the Growing Community. Thank you, Aaron Mule. Thank you, Meg. Perfect. Okay. Any other questions or any comments? And tomorrow, I'll tell you, we're going to get really into the nuts and bolts. Oh, here's one from Ned Hobart. Once again, here we go. This kind of design on north side of town would bring good balance to all of the development that has occurred on the south side of the community at the Riverwalk downtown. I like this very much. Thank you, Ned. That was a very nice insight on your part. And I'll tell you, Ted is a tough cookie to crack because he's been critical. He's on me like that. So it's folks like that, and Mary Day definitely have been. Make sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's. So let's continue the good work, folks.
Mike, you've got a hand raised from Sheila. So Sheila, if you've got a question.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, just unmute yourself, Sheila, if you do. All right, maybe we'll come back. And Sheila, once you get that, Dale, and maybe Dan on the side, help her unmute and then see if she wants to chime in on that. More on the chat box. Betsy, what would the difference in cost be since no property taking was required? Here is the question. I like it, Betsy. So Betsy is on your council, on the council, and she's worried about dollars and figures as well. So we asked the same question from the RPO and DOT about their estimate and right-of-way costs. And so we are waiting anxiously to get back the numbers that they use to estimate right-of-way and to estimate the relocation of the sewer line and the overall construction costs of the corridor and anything else that ties into that. So more to come. Hopefully have that answer. The good news is think about the cost and savings that we'll have in right-of-way. And any project, the rule of thumb for NCDOT, I used to work for them, but for a Department of Transportation, the rule of thumb is 70%. 70% of a typical project in a suburban rural setting is dedicated to right-of-way acquisition. 70%. And the price tag that you guys had on this project 4 years ago was $16 to $17 million. And I would challenge that price tag is probably pretty low based on what I saw on the analysis. So, but yeah, 70%, we're basically avoiding at least 6% of the previous cost by avoiding additional right-of-way taking. And that is our key to success. I really feel that way. All right, any more comments here? Otherwise, I'm going to ask Mayor Sadler to come back into the mix and we close up this meeting. But any more comments on the chat box?
Nothing I see.
Okay, perfect. Well, folks, we will have more information for you. It's day one. Thank you so much for joining us. But as we move along here, we'll have more and more information embedded into this mural, embedded into this design studio. We'll share more of that tomorrow at 5 o'clock and then a grand finale on Thursday at 5 o'clock. But thank you so much on behalf of the design team. Thank you so much. Mayor Sadler.
Yes, sir. Thanks to everyone for coming out and having this great discussion with us tonight. Very fruitful. I think we are on our way to a great plan. And again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. And y'all have a great evening.
Terrific. Enjoy your dinner. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, bye.